You understand? Oh, okay. So we might not have a microphone.
Can everybody hear us okay?
Can you all hear?
Do we need to turn on the microphone?
Okay. We'll go with that. Easy. Welcome to Lovable Bad Boys. I'm really excited about this panel, about some of the things we're going to discuss. First of all, I just want to say, let's leave questions for the end. So if you have questions you want, write them down and we will get to them. I'm going to leave about the last 15 minutes for questions. So yeah, just going there. And then I did a little Facebook stalking on these wonderful people here. And, and I mean, I'm just really excited. Very knowledgeable panel. These people know what they're talking about. So I'm going to start with Stan here. And I learned he is an author of sci-fi, fantasy, romance, and even dabbles in mystery.
Yep.
All right, and I'll let you take it away from there and tell us a little bit more about yourself.
Well, that doesn't work. Yeah, I'm actually filling in for Taylor Swift today because she's like the person that knows more about Lovable Bad Boys than anyone. Taylor was unavailable, so she called me up. No, I'm just kidding. Michael already kind of gave you a skinny on what I do. Oddly enough, I started out in kind of new adult rom-com, believe it or not, and got some Lovable Bad Boys in there. My home genre, if I had one, would be kind of a sci-fi fantasy. I recently did 3 mysteries that I co-authored with a friend from my publishing house, so that was a bit of a change. The guy is a little bit of a bad boy, but not too much. I mean, he is dead, so we can't do too many bad things, I guess. So that's me.
Okay, and then Angela. I know Angela. We've done some panels in the past, and we've had a lot of great experiences together. I do know that she writes paranormal romance. She is an author, and I will let you say a little bit more about that.
So I'm on this panel because I write the ultimate bad boy. I write about Lucifer. And so we get to look at the arc of how that happens.
Okay, and then, sorry, we're done.
Yeah.
Okay, so Jonathan, looking at his Facebook and everything, Jonathan is a bad boy himself, as far as I can tell. So you were in the Marines, is that correct?
That is correct, sir. I'm a former corporal of Marines, and yes, I'm on this panel because whoever's scheduling it knows I'm the bad boy. And proud of it.
Awesome. Wonderful. And I am Michael Jensen. I am author of young adult paranormal fantasy, my novel Woven. And I'm just super happy to be moderating this panel. So I want to start out by asking, what is the definition of a bad boy? So take it away.
In some measure, that depends on the genre and what the audience is that you're trying to appeal to. For what I've written, and based on my own experience, is veterans. Because so often, we're the ones who are willing to get in any kind of trouble, anywhere we can, with anyone or anything. But that isn't true for everybody. It can depend on your writing, what you're trying to write. If you're trying to write a Western, or you're trying to write something contemporary mystery, you might not need some hard-boiled, loudmouth, foul veteran to be your bad guy. It might be something closer akin to, say, Nikki Sixx from Motley Crue, who is another example of bad guy. I mean, how much heroin has that man done? And stopped his heart and lived the life that comes with it. Who are you modeling this character after? Who do you see this character becoming like?
In my definition, I think of the bad boy as being the wolf in the pack of sheep. So it's the person who goes against what the authority generally says to do. It's the person that goes against the grain, the one that causes the conflict, the one who wants, in a sense, it's the villain in some ways, but redeemable.
I think that pretty much covers it. I mean, it's a lot of times, I think the reason they go that direction is because they are trying to be themselves. I don't know that that being a bad boy inherently requires ill intent. I think sometimes it's just a matter of, this is who I am, this is what I want to do, society says something else, but I don't really care because I don't feel the need to. So I'm going to find my own way. Sometimes people get hurt, sometimes it is intentional, but I don't think it's necessarily a defining quality of a bad boy.
Yeah, I agree with all of this. You're all right on. Awesome. I'm just going to move on because I can't say anything better. So I want to know, and this is a question I had while I was developing the questions here. I was like, well, I want to know, what's the line between a bad boy and a villain? Like, how do you know when you've crossed over into the territory of really bad?
Again, I think it's that redeemable quality. They want to do what's right, but they want to be true to who they are.
That would sum it up pretty well. I mean, if you look at Clint Eastwood's character in Outlaw Josie Wales, he still has redeemable traits, especially compared to, say, the bandits that he encounters later in the movie. A couple of 3 different times, yes, Clint Eastwood is a bad man in that movie, but he still does the right things when it's necessary, and he has those redeeming qualities that make us prefer Josie Wales over everybody he's busy killing.
Another really good example would be Roland in the Dark Tower series.
Well, I'm going to throw in, a lot of times when at least when I think about bad boys, I don't know about you, when I think about bad boys, a lot of times, especially in the whole lovable term, it's a matter of the redeemable thing. Who is this guy really? Because if you look at a bad boy, look at Danny from Grease, the guy that John Travolta made famous, and versus Darth Vader. Darth Vader ended up being redeemed, but you're not going to cuddle the guy. He's a villain. And Danny, he was just kind of out there, and he was cutting against the grain, but he still wanted to turn things around. And we found Sandra Dee. He thought, hey, I need to make a difference in my life. I need to go. Darth Vader, it was just like he was bad right up until the end when he realized basically that he could betray the Emperor. We like to think that he wanted to save his son. Maybe he did, but sometimes Sith they have a long history of killing their masters. So even though he was technically redeemed, you can't necessarily say that he was a bad boy that turned good. He was a villain because all of his intent was bad.
So really, if you look at it, yeah.
And to be fair to Darth Vader, cuddling him is kind of like cuddling up with a toaster. I don't see any woman ever just be like, oh, my precious toaster.
I can totally reform you.
That one's still up in the
That
air.
one's still up in the
That
air.
might be a good
That is up in the air because we do not know. I mean, he killed his father.
Him and what's her face?
Ray.
Okay.
Kind of have a weird vibe.
Yeah.
Really, really a weird vibe.
But again, with Kylo Ren, I don't mean to cut you off too much, but Kylo Ren still kind of has an underlying desire to do good as he sees it. And even as he wants to fall to the dark side, he still thinks that's the better path.
So how in the hell you explain how you and mommy met years later and that kind of relationship is beyond me. It's almost better to say, I met her in a whorehouse.
So as far as cuddling up with the toaster, obviously nobody wants to do that. But here's a question for you. Do bad boys need to have sex appeal?
Yes.
Oh, okay, so can we talk about that?
That is the whole driving force behind the bad boy. Women have this instinct within them whom they really want somebody who's going to be the protector, who's going to be the warrior. At different cycles it's proven by psychology that there are different cycles in a women's month where they want the nurturing type, but when they are fertile, they want the warrior. They want that bad boy because they know that that man can protect their offspring. They want the nurturing type to help them raise those children, but they want the bad boy to procreate with.
For some reason, I'm thinking of Thomas Reed from President.
Okay, so let me ask you, how do you determine if your story as a writer How do you determine if your story needs a bad boy?
Why not? The bad boy is a point of friction and a point of conflict. Every story worth reading has conflict. If everything is Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood and everything is going great, then what's the point of reading it? We have to have some sort of conflict. And the bad boy brings that friction into somebody's life. My wife will attest to this. When she met me, she went from a very quiet existence to, as she put it, it's like living with a rock god. I am loud, I am brash, I am extremely unkind at times, but she also has those points where I am the nurturer. I'm the one who cares for things, the one who gets stuff done when she needs it the most. And she finds those qualities and they come along and she uses them as necessary.
And with that, I mean, and I've written Bad Boys, but obviously the sex appeal isn't there for me. But I've talked to my wife about it, and she reads an awful lot. The redeemable part, the reason that keeps getting so much emphasis is, and this is from my wife, is that apparently women generally like to fix their men.
And they like to reform
They
them.
like to reform them. And
Yes.
so one of the purposes of the Bad Boys is not just to add friction.
Save their souls.
But exactly, because it gives the woman a sense of fulfillment. It's like, look what I did. I saved this person. I took this raw material that was really ugly and brash and he looked like that, and I made it. He still has hair.
You just don't have enough on top.
I'm not even going to comment on that. No, I really won't. What do you find on Facebook anyway? I didn't.
We'll save that for later.
But the thing is, on the male side of it, with Bad Boy, it also gives the idea of, hey, I can be redeemed. Because a lot of guys, I mean, especially when they hit that puberty phase, when they go through adolescence, they're looking for themselves. They don't know who they are. They don't necessarily know what they want to be. They have all these hormones and emotions roiling, and a lot of times it comes out in violent and explosive ways. And guys, we do stupid things a lot.
Guys do stupid things?
Yes.
When did this happen?
Maybe it's just me. But the thing is sometimes you look back on your life, especially after you're settled down, and you wonder, can I make up for that? Can I be redeemed? And I don't think that's the only reason men seek women. In fact, I know it's not the only reason they seek them, but I think in each story, it's the idea of there is a problem that can be fixed. It's the idea of conflict. It gives the guys an opportunity to become better than they were, and it gives the women a chance to help them get there. And that way, you end up having a great team, and you get that synergy, and it makes for happy ever after.
It's also that element of unconditional love, right? We all crave that. We want to be loved like that. And so to create someone who is, in a sense, very rash, very unbelievably harsh, and to have somebody look at them and love them exactly the way that they are, it's a miracle and it changes everything.
David Drake actually hit it really well in his Belisarius series with the character Valentinian of Thrace. If you get the chance and you haven't read that, fix that problem. Valentinian of Thrace is a swordsman who is violent beyond compare. The guy is repeatedly used for executions just at the drop of the hat. But at some point, he has a defining moment in his life where he realizes he needs to be redeemed. And it comes in interacting with and being the caretaker for a slave prostitute's baby boy. And he becomes the caretaker for this child, and he finds in this child the source of his redemption. It's just raising this child and teaching it the right way to be.
What was the author name again?
David Drake. He might have written a book or two.
And the movie Willow, very much like that. Mad Mardigan, played by Val Kilmer. That was actually one of Val Kilmer's better roles, in my opinion. Same thing. He gets to take care of little Laura Danad, and takes her along with the little short people to go. Of course, he meets a woman, falls in love, gets reformed.
Heathcliff on Wuthering Heights.
So,
Yeah. He's definitely, but Heathcliff in Wuthering Heights would be my example. Yes.
How about for this trope, if it's sideways on it or something like that? Like one of my stories I most recently finished had a quote-unquote bad boy type character who was a loan shark, of course, only she wasn't a guy. She was very much like a bad boy character, except for a woman, but she was also not. She also still had characteristically women things as well. But I mean, taking this trope and turning it sideways, which I think I did with this character, being a lone shark, of course, or a former revolutionary of a revolution that's been won, and she's lower class, so, you know.
I'm finding that a lot more. I'm finding that people are pulling that type of character in. And if you look at Katniss, in a sense, isn't that the same thing?
So, yeah, I'm glad nice segue, because I was just about to ask, well, what about the bad girl? Is there room for a bad girl in your story? Is there a place for that? Or do we only believe that the guys can be the bad guy, or the lovable bad boy?
I think that there's a shift that's happening in consciousness right now, where women and men are both actually seeing each other on more of an equal footing. So therefore, women are feeling more safe to explore those type of emotions within themselves. Before, you were kind of pigeonholed into this one little section. You had to be loving, you had to be nurturing, you had to be connected to society in this type of manner. And women are, of course, are social creatures, right? So now that we're starting to equalize the sexes, we're seeing more warriors, women, coming forward. So therefore, these type of behaviors are starting to pop up more in the psychology of women. And I feel that there is room for that to be there, and there's a need for it in literature for these women to be able to see their story arc and understand where they come from.
Zena?
It also depends on how we approach the female character. If she's just going to be the same static character all throughout, we're not going to see that development in her. But if we take a female character and make her dynamic, maybe being around the bad boy rubs off on her. Maybe she starts to be a little more colorful in how she expresses herself or how she handles people.
Maybe she goes through things that change her.
And she starts to understand him better in the process as she's growing. That is, in its own sense, the bad girl. No commentary on my marriage. Except to say that my father-in-law told me one day, you know, she says a lot more things now than she used to that are profanity and vulgarity. And I said, well, that's nice. She's a grown-ass woman. Well, ain't that right, baby? Damn right.
As a musical theater major, I'm glad we brought up Grease. And I like the ending, how the end of Grease, she spends all this time trying to fix the bad boy, but in the end, there's part of him that rubs off on her. She becomes the bad girl in the end. And
She understands that there's something more wild in her as well.
Right, and I think that's where the equality piece, I'm huge on equality, and I think there is that equality piece, that while we are talking about bad boys, I definitely don't want to leave out the idea that you can write the exact same things about a bad girl.
But the statistics are that more generally women do have these type of qualities, and you do not find sociopathic or psychopathic behavior popping up as much in women because we're just wired a little bit different than men.
Yeah. Well, and testosterone actually does make a difference. I mean, it really does. But on the topic of quote-unquote bad girls and stuff, I'm going to pull in Brandon Sanderson here. Vin, Shalon, I mean, those are two of several examples of what he's written. And the interesting thing about Shalon, how many of you read Oathgate? I don't want to give any spoilers. A few. Yeah, Oathbringer. I don't know. Yeah, sorry, I'm reading a note. They have the Oathgates and everything. I'm not going to go too much into Oathbringer because there are spoilers. But the interesting thing with Shalon's arc is she starts out in Way of Kings as this, kind of pristine little girl. She's more or less Daddy's little girl, and everything she does is about taking care of her family. This entire adventure she embarks on is basically her fulfilling a defined role. And as she breaks out, as she gets out on her own, she starts finding out, hey, I don't necessarily have to sit in this pigeonhole, be this person my entire life. And then in Way of Kings, and I'm not going to say that because it's a spoiler, in Way of Kings, she has an event happen that allows her to really start broadening her horizon, and she finally starts to grow into a more adult role. And by the time we get to Oathbringer, she has this moment where she realizes, hey, I am kind of an adult, and yet this process of getting there has involved a lot of cognitive dissonance, for lack of a better term. It's a matter of her asking herself over and over, who am I, what do I want, what does Shalong really want? And in fact, she has to deal with that, and she's not bad per se, but one of the personas that she adopts as a light weaver is that of kind of the tough girl. She's got the cowboy hat, and the white duster, and she's a street girl and stuff like that. Like kind of Wild West, and she finds that she likes that persona, and it's interesting how that conflicts with what she grew up as, and even with some of the other personas that she has. So I think when you're doing the bad girl, it has to be approached with a lot more nuance than just the bad guy. I think the bad guy is probably a really easy stereotype to throw out there. And bad girls take a little more thought.
Well, they also have different tools and layers that they're using. A bad girl can also be salacious and seductive and have a different source of appeal than the bad boy would.
They tend to be more manipulative, is what I would say. See, I was a bad girl because my phone just went off.
Yeah, right. So I'm going to throw out just a little bit of controversy in this conversation. As an author of young adult fantasy, I'm also a gay author, and I love to write my women very similar in the art as I would a man, and vice versa, because I find that they are not that different. There are not as many differences from what I'm discovering anyway. Because people are people, and what I learned is that whether it's a bad girl or it's a bad guy, if you really want them to have layers and not fall into the stereotype, then maybe think about switching the gender of your character and see who's really falling into stereotypes and who's not. And anyway, I just wanted to throw that out there because I love writing that way.
Well, when I read romance, I love it when the woman saves the man. It's kind of awesome.
Yeah.
It's a very cool thing.
Is it Enchanted?
Yes.
Yeah, that's right.
It's empowering.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Jude Devereaux uses that technique a lot, where she would have her heroine save the hero.
Well, riffing off that point, I mean, the entire idea of the bad boy goes back to what we were saying earlier. The bad boy is someone who is often viewed as needing to be saved. And I don't think we have to define saved by simply physical salvation, like you're about to die and I just pulled you off that pit or I kept you from falling off that ledge. I think the psychological salvation of someone is at least as important, if not more so, because there could be people that survive a traumatic event physically. I don't know if you can talk to that, but maybe they don't necessarily survive it emotionally, and that's why it's nice to have the bad boy be saved by the bad girl, even if it's not her like pushing him out from the car.
The mental trauma is something that is very real, and sometimes that's the biggest thing that a female character can do, is help save a man from his own head. Because so often that's what men beat ourselves up with the most. We are our own worst enemy. A numero uno test case right here. And that in and of itself can be a very powerful scene or series of scenes as you build up to that people can connect with and find meaning for in their own life.
It goes back to those gender roles being pegged out for us very young, right? Where we are told this is the way that a boy behaves, this is the way that a girl behaves, and expecting them to follow that arc throughout and tearing down the psychology of those expectations. And so if we take away those expectations, I'm going to share something. I don't think there's anybody in this room that I need to worry about. My daughter is non-binary. She's bisexual. We have never in our entire existence ever tried to tell her who she needed to be from the time that she was small. I am watching most of the LGBT community and seeing how their children are coming through this who have been told that they need to be a certain thing, and how the psychological ramifications are affecting those children compared to my daughter continuing to be solid, if that helps. I don't know if that makes any sense whatsoever, but
Absolutely.
that's what I have to say about that.
Thank you for sharing that. So before we get to questions, I want to just ask each one of you, where do you get your bad boy inspiration or bad girl?
He talks to me in my head.
She hears voices.
I hear voices all the time.
Mine stalks me on Facebook. For my second novel, Low Spell, where it was, that was the first time I really experimented with a bad boy. It was kind of a change for me because my first novel, The Cinderella Project, was it was an interesting attempt to write my perception of the perfect man as far as women were concerned. I found out that I was a little bit off on that, but I think it was still a good book. So I tried, let's do the bad boy thing. I thought, let's go that route. That was also an interesting adventure because he ended up being too much of a jerk at first. He needed a lot of changes because he had the bad boy part down, but he didn't have a lovable part. Where I got the inspiration for that, oddly enough, was for myself, believe it or not. In fact, that entire second novel was kind of written as an apology to a girl I had known in high school who, for whatever reason, had a crush on me. And I knew that, and I hate to say that as a young teenage boy that I did do something stupid, and I just kind of strung her along and played with her heart. And I felt terrible about that years later. When I realized what I had done and how much of a total jerk I had been to this girl and just breaking her heart, like carelessly, deliberately, I thought, I need to try to fix that. And that kind of became the basis for the entire plot of that novel and kind of where he was going. It still needed some tweaking. It wasn't an exact rip-off, but that was where I pulled inspiration for at least one of that was.
For me, it's psychology and trying to understand all facets of the human brain. Why would somebody go this direction? Let's explore why they are like they are. So whenever I develop a character or a bad boy or anyone really, I try to psychologically analyze them and decide why they are who they are, so I can understand them better.
I think Louis L'Amour set the best example on it when he wrote about what he had lived. If you read his stories, the man lived the places he wrote about. And for me, my inspiration comes from having lived so much of that experience and living in Marine barracks for 4 years. Anybody who was around Marines, yes, there's the public image of, oh, the pretty blue uniforms and, oh, they're all so well behaved. Come to the barracks on a Friday night when it's a 4-day weekend. Please do. It resembles the frat house from Animal House, but with a lot less filters. There is nothing kind or good about what's happening in the barracks on a Friday night. And those who've been in will totally understand. But I've lived it. You know, I was raised LDS. I was considered the bad boy by a lot of parents. They didn't like me dating their daughters. I joined the Marine Corps and I was fairly normal and average. With the exception of the time I chased somebody out through the barracks naked, wearing a coonskin hat and cowboy boots and a K-bar. Actually, no, I was totally sober.
That makes it even better.
But if you ask my mother-in-law, she wants me dead and she thinks I'm Satan's spawn. I don't have tattoos. I've never laid a hand on my wife. I don't drink. I don't do things that would be obvious bad boy signs to somebody who is LDS. But to her mind and mode of thinking, I am Satan incarnate. And there is no explaining that, but it makes for a great source of inspiration when you need to write a character. What's going to set some girl's mother off? That is a wonderful story on all its own. I will attest to that. And it can also be the actions. The first novel I ever published, the main character, who is a bad boy himself, but somewhat redeemable, at a point in the novel, fancy term for it, but He throws somebody out a third-story window in front of a group of children. Yeah, defenestration. Write a romance novel involving defenestration on the actions of the main character. That's a challenge. It's a lot of fun. But what makes him redeemable? There's plenty there to redeem. You just got to work through all the layers. And in the case of the lead female, it was teaching him that there's a time to be dominant and there's a time to submit and lay back and relax.
Yes, John is my inspiration for Bad Boy. Actually, I love Buffy. I've always loved the Buffy series, and Spike is kind of the bad boy for me. I really like the Spike character. He's just dark enough and yet charming enough that, I don't know,
I
totally.
just
Fought
barely
for his soul.
started watching that series.
I'm gonna say that made me think of My Little Pony. I'm sorry.
Okay,
Spike.
so My Little Pony would be a good source for you.
No, it's not. You said Spike, and I immediately pictured a purple dragon. That was myself.
All right, so I want to open it up to questions for the audience.
I have a somewhat specific one, but I think,
And sorry, please speak up so everybody can
okay,
hear.
sorry. So the question generically is, can a bad boy also be a villain? Because in some books you want to have the sympathy or the redeeming, you want to redeem the villain as well. And so I'm wondering, if you do have a bad boy with redeeming qualities as your villain, does there need to be some other conflict in addition to that? So you've got your man versus environment, whatever. Do you need one of those others as an additional form of conflict to make it work?
I think that you've always got to have an ultimate evil, something that just cannot be brought down.
Like Texas.
It's the difference between Han Solo as the bad boy, but then what's there behind Han Solo that's an even bigger problem? Darth Vader.
Right.
I think we've already tapped the Kylo Ren thing, but I think he is a very good contemporary example where he's very clearly the villain, but he still has that lovable bad boy role.
But
But there's still, yeah.
the Sith is what's evil.
Something that comes to mind also for that is the Anita Blake novels, Richard and John Claude. Like they have redeemable qualities, but they also do really horrible things, like eating people. You know,
For the other part.
Did at least use good barbecue sauce?
no, just
So
not eating barbecue.
that depends on what side of the fence you're sitting on. Was it evil for them? Some people.
No, that's the thing.
That's
It's
the thing.
because
It
of the
wasn't
nature
evil
of
for
them
them.
being a werewolf
Yeah.
and a
I
vampire.
think exploring the whole bad boy element or evil and good is deciding where you're sitting in society. There are certain places where things that we've seen that are just absolutely apprehensible that is considered part of their culture. It's the exploration, again, of the human condition. And am I redeemable even though someone might look at me and think what I'm doing is horrific?
You had a question back there?
Yes, I was just, so earlier, Wuthering Heights was mentioned, and I was
Yes.
just thinking about how, personally, I don't really find Heathcliff to be lovable. What's the difference between a lovable bad boy and one who isn't?
He was lovable in the beginning.
Okay.
That is why I always hearken to that one, because he started out lovable. He was a bad boy, but he was lovable. And then Kathy ruined him in a sense. And so then he became unredeemable. He became the villain because of, instead of having the woman nurture him and bring him to that beautiful place, Kathy ruined it.
Well, couldn't we also consider Mr. Darcy
I was
to be a
just gonna
lovable
say
bad
that.
boy?
Yes, we can.
Because
He was.
by the conventions of their society, he's a prick. Let's not mince words about it. Mr. Darcy's a prick from the very get-go. But as the story progresses, we find out more layers about the man and what makes him redeemable.
Mr. Dole from Once Upon a Time.
Yes,
Oh,
absolutely.
So
All of his reasons are very
Right.
valid.
Yes.
It just goes about a horrible way.
It's just that they're all very selfish.
Right, which brings up a really good point. A lot of it's a matter of perception. I mean, lovable, what makes someone lovable? It's different for everyone. I think there might be common societal definitions, but there are some bad boys that some people are just going to love. Some bad boys, they're just not. What really makes them lovable is going to be up to you. I know that seems like a throwaway
That's what
answer,
resonates.
but again, with Mr. Darcy, it's a matter of once you understood him and why he did these things that seemed so terrible, then you knew that the real person underneath was someone you could love. Whereas with Heathcliff, and honestly, I'm not going to talk much about Wuthering Heights because I hated it, read it in high school, and jettisoned it from my mind. But the thing is when you get to a point of villainy, they lose those qualities that are lovable, and they just are simply a bad boy. I think that's where they cross into villain
Yes.
territory.
Starts out that direction and then goes.
Question?
So one of the challenges I'm having with what I'm working on right now is essentially the main character is the lovable bad boy, but the love interest is also the bad girl, only like 10 times worse than him.
So she drags him out of his comfort zone and makes him explore aspects of himself that would normally not.
Yeah, she pushes him basically
Yes.
because he's very isolated and he's very withdrawn from the world. So she pushes him to not be that anymore. But the question is, how do you approach that? Because it's a very destructive relationship.
Well, it seems
But-
to me that he's actually the hero in the story.
Yes.
So therefore, if he's the hero, it's the hero's journey. So you need to have a purpose of what you're trying to get him to be.
Mhm.
Where do you want him to go? You need to know that. And then once you know where he needs to go, she can push him, she can twist him, she can turn everything around. That's the plot twist. That's the excitement that happens in the middle. But he ends up in this place because this journey brought him here.
I kind of get the feeling from how I've been looking at it that he's going to go on a real far downward spiral and then come back
And
up
then come back
really
up.
hard.
Okay, yeah, that's the hero's journey.
I have another question back there.
So you mentioned a lot about the redemption or the love interest. Is there or what ways are there to redeem the bad boy without introducing the love interest or having love all gushy, whatever?
They change within themselves. Again, we go back to the hero's journey, right? I start out this way. All this growth happens, and then I become this. And so you have to have trials that come in that test their will and change them. And something that they experience is going to make them look at their humanity. Because really, that's what happens with the love interest. They come in, they see them, and they reach in and find their humanity. If you don't have the love interest going on, that person needs to learn to love themselves, if that makes sense.
There still has to be a driving mechanism and a catalyst for change.
Yes.
So it might not be a love interest. It could be something else, but whatever else that something is, it's got to be something solid, tangible that drives the plot forward.
Somebody mentioned a story where a child was brought in and they had to raise the child, and that was their redemption.
Yeah, memory.
Yes.
The word redeem generally means to buy back. And we hear about payback and pay for it, and et cetera, but the idea is they are finding a way they're finding a way to at least emotionally and mentally make up for what they did wrong. And that's that change that they're talking about. They wish they could take it back. And they may not be able to, but they're in a position where if they could, they would.
Okay, we're gonna wrap things up here. So I'm gonna ask that everybody kind of reintroduce themselves a little bit, say where they're gonna be for the rest of the conference, where you can find them. And I just wanted to start by saying, so Spike was he's my lovable bad boy. I want everyone to pick a lovable bad boy that they can think of that they absolutely adore, and then just say where you're going to be. I'm going to be I've got another panel just over in Maple. It's Playing by Ear, The Genius of Irving Berlin. And then tomorrow morning at 10 o'clock, I'm doing an LGBTQ panel in the Canyon Room. Okay?
I'm going to have to throw out Mr. Darcy, as cliche as that is. And I mean the Mr. Darcy one with Keira Knightley, but that's just because Keira Knightley is not. Can't lie. But yeah, as far as where I'm going to be, I've got a 2 o'clock panel in Elm, Book of Mormon Adaptations and Inspiration, and then I've got the 3 o'clock panel with this gentleman right over here. That's over at Canyon. That's Love, Sex, and Romance. Yeah. That's what the title is, Don.
That's on my list.
So, I'm Angela Hartley. I would probably choose Heathcliff. Yes, I think he's my favorite, just because of how bad it went. And I am going to be on a panel on Saturday at 9 a.m. writing non-human points of view. And that's in Bryce at 9. And you can find me on www.angelasattitudeadjustment.com.
I'm John LaForce. My personal icon for Lovable Bad Boy would be Michael Harmon from John Ringo's Ghost series, because Ringo explored a lot of the issues that I've dealt with over the years and helped me to come to terms with them and how to handle them better. Brilliant series, I highly recommend it. You all should read it.
All right, well, thank you, everybody, and feel free to ask us questions.